The growing crisis in Ukraine escalating at this hour. We are tracking all developments from the Russian attack to the impacts here at home.
We start our team coverage with CBS News reporter Natalie Brand, who's live in Washington, D.C., where President Biden just spoke. Natalie, good afternoon.
Len and Amanda, and the Pentagon has called this the initial stages of a large-scale invasion of Ukraine. As you mentioned, the president just gave remarks announcing new sanctions on 4 of Russia's largest banks, as well as new export controls. And he also announced that additional U.S. troops will be headed to Germany to bolster NATO allies.
Explosions rock cities throughout Ukraine, and Russian tanks could be seen crossing the border as Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has begun.
The attack is ongoing in many areas, and we need all the support, all the additional support we can get from our friends and allies.
President Biden said Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction this attack will bring.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
The president has warned of unprecedented sanctions against Russia in response.
In today's actions, we've now sanctioned Russian banks that together hold around $1 trillion in assets.
President Biden has said U.S. forces will not fight in Ukraine, but thousands of U.S. troops are positioned in nearby NATO member countries.
NATO is now going to have functionally a border right up against a hostile Russia-controlled Ukraine.
Thursday morning, cars lined up at the border checkpoint into Poland as people try to flee Ukraine any way they can.
What are your immediate plans?
None. Get to the U.S. Assistance Center down the line and then ask them where to go and what to do, what they think is best.
U.S. forces in Poland have already set up camps to begin receiving refugees.
And this afternoon, the Pentagon announced that 7,000 additional U.S. troops will be headed to Germany to reassure NATO allies in the region that the U.S. stands ready to help them in any way that's needed. We've also learned that NATO is expected to convene a special meeting tomorrow to discuss next steps. Len.
And Natalie, one of California's senators had some strong language in support of Ukraine.
That's right, and she talked about the need for additional assistance. Senator Feinstein said, while we must seek to prevent a broader war in Europe at all costs, I strongly believe we must also support the defense of Ukraine with additional military equipment and reinforce our NATO partners with additional U.S. forces. She went on to say, Putin's unnecessary attacks make it apparent that he's unable to accept a free and democratic Ukraine. The people of Ukraine have the right to a free and open government, and the United States should stand with them. We are also seeing these demonstrations in cities across the country of U.S. citizens standing in solidarity with Ukraine. And the president, in his remarks, say not only is European security at risk here, but really freedom around the world with this Russian invasion of Ukraine. Len.
Yeah, so many hearts breaking for the people of Ukraine. Natalie, thank you so much. We appreciate that. And the Russian attack on Ukraine leaving a dent in the stock market early today. Right now, the Dow is down about 145 points.
The economic impact of the attack on Ukraine could hit all aspects of our economy. KPIX 5's Ann Makovic has more on what we can expect.
Yeah, I just spoke with an economic expert from San Jose State. He says it's going to start with high oil and gas prices, which will then bleed into higher prices of raw products. How bad it's going to get is not yet clear.
But I think the indirect impacts are potentially more serious because, again, we don't know how this conflict is going to unfold. What is Russia going to do in retaliation? Are they going to launch cyber attacks, things like that? So markets are worried.
Of course, gas prices here in the Bay Area are already hanging close to $5 a gallon. Drivers we spoke with are concerned about what's next.
Yeah, it's a concern, and I think there's going to be a lot of young men dying over this thing too, which is a bigger concern.
Now, I also just spoke with Congressman John Garamendi. He just returned from a NATO meeting in Europe, and I got his perspective on the conflict.
This is a major European war for no good reason at all, other than Putin's own megalomania. And so here we are. We're going to have to be very, very solid in our alliances.
You can watch my entire interview with Congressman Garamendi this afternoon on CBS News Bay Area. Back to you.
And thank you for that. Volunteers at a local church organized a letter writing campaign in support of the Ukrainian people. Members of the San Francisco Zion Church are writing letters to politicians and local officials hoping to advocate peace and voice concerns about the unfolding crisis. The group shared their letters on Zoom and chanted, "We want peace." The volunteers plan to continue writing letters for the next 3 days. And we are following all the breaking new developments that come out of Ukraine on KPIX.com and streaming, as always, on CBS News Bay Area.